Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, I really wish I had handled that a little bit differently?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe a simple disagreement like turned into a huge argument and you think, gosh, how did we get here?
All the time.
It happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
So this is a deep dive into some incredible material that you sent over that really explores these exact communication challenges.
Yeah.
And we're going to unpack the most powerful nuggets from it and give you, the listeners, some actionable strategies that you can immediately apply to improve your own communication.
For sure. And the range of situations covered is pretty impressive. We're talking about dealing with disrespect,
Right.
resolving arguments without things getting totally out of control,
Yeah.
setting boundaries with those difficult people that we all know and love,
Yeah.
even navigating those high-stakes conversations, and of course, improving everyday interactions.
Right. So in a nutshell, you shared some really insightful material with me. And today our mission is to extract the most powerful strategies from it so you, the listener, can actually use them right away.
That's right. It's all about taking action.
So let's jump right in. I think a really good place to start would be with disrespectful behavior.
Yeah.
We all encounter it sometimes. Someone says something rude or belittling, and I think our natural instinct is to kind of fire back, right, to meet that negativity head on.
Oh, for sure. It's like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
But the material you shared really points out why that instinct, while it's super understandable, can often backfire big time.
Right.
It just escalates the situation unnecessarily, and you end up feeling drained, and nothing really gets resolved.
Totally.
Sorry.
So what's the better way? What do we do instead of, kind of snapping back?
Well, the first step might surprise you. It's all about taking a pause. 5 to 7 seconds of silence.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And it's not just awkward silence. It's
Yeah.
a deliberate moment to center yourself. Studies have shown that this brief pause allows that initial emotional surge to subside.
Oh, wow.
It gives your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, a chance to take over. And that allows for a more thoughtful response instead of a purely reactive one.
So there's actually like a neurological benefit to that pause.
Exactly. It's not just about taking a breath to calm down. There's some real science behind it.
I like it. So we take that pause. We kind of let things settle a little bit. What comes after that moment of silence?
This is interesting. The material suggests asking the person to repeat what they said.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right, because often when people hear their own harsh words kind of echoed back to them, they actually become aware of how negative they sounded.
It's like holding up a mirror.
Exactly, and it gives them a chance to sort of self-correct. Maybe they rephrase their statement in a more considerate way.
I like that. It kind of puts the onus back on them a little bit. Think
Uh-huh.
about what they've just said.
Right, it makes them confront their own words.
Okay, so we've taken the pause. We've asked them to repeat themselves. Now, what's the powerful response?
So this is where you really shift the dynamic.
Hmm.
The material suggests responding with, "That's where your real power is."
That's good.
It's a very calm, collected statement.
Yeah.
And it shows that you're not being pulled into their negativity. You're in control.
You're not letting them dictate your emotional state.
Exactly. And you're taking control of the conversation.
I like that. It's assertive but not aggressive.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about arguments. Because let's face it, we've all been there. We're in the middle of a disagreement and we're trying to find a resolution.
Oh, yeah. Arguments are inevitable.
So what does the material tell us about how to handle those situations?
Well, one of the big things is about shifting your mindset. Often when we're in an argument, we're focused on winning.
Oh, yeah,
We just want to prove that we're right and the other person is wrong.
for sure.
Mm.
But, I've definitely had situations where I've technically won an argument, but the other person, they don't feel heard. They just end up resentful.
Right.
And it actually damages the relationship.
Right. And that's exactly the point the material makes. Even if you win the argument, you might lose something much more important.
Exactly.
Right.
So what's the alternative?
Well, it suggests reframing arguments, not as battles to be won,
Right.
but as problems to be unraveled together.
I like that.
And to help with that, the key question to ask is, what am I missing?
That's powerful because it kind of immediately takes the edge off the conversation.
It does. It shows that you're open to hearing the other person's perspective.
And you're acknowledging that you don't have all the answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about collaboration, not opposition.
So it's less about being right and more about understanding.
Precisely.
Now let's move on to another tricky area, and that's dealing with those people we just don't really click with,
Oh, yeah. Those difficult people.
Yeah, we all have them in our lives.
We do.
So how do we communicate effectively in those situations particularly when it comes to setting boundaries.
The key here is learning to say no confidently and without feeling guilty.
That's easier said than done for a lot of people.
It is. But setting those healthy boundaries is crucial for your own well-being.
Right, because I think a lot of us, especially, people who are maybe a little bit more prone to people-pleasing,
Yeah.
have a really hard time saying no.
It can be really tough. And the material suggests practicing firm no responses.
Hmm?
And importantly, without feeling like you have to give a big, long explanation.
Just a simple no.
Exactly. When it aligns with your boundaries and priorities, it's a powerful response. It shows self-respect.
It's about knowing your worth and what
Yeah.
you're willing to tolerate.
Right, and it's about prioritizing your time and energy.
Okay, so we've talked about some specific conflict scenarios.
Yeah.
But, the material also highlights how important communication is in a broader sense,
Yeah.
in all areas of our life.
Oh, absolutely. Communication skills are not just nice to have. They really do impact every aspect of your life.
From work to relationships to just navigating the world around us.
Exactly. Your ability to communicate effectively can determine your success in job interviews,
Right.
the quality of your relationships,
Yeah.
your ability to resolve conflicts.
It even impacts how we feel about ourselves.
It does. The material actually argues that becoming a really strong communicator, like a 10 out of 10 communicator, can actually change the trajectory of your life.
Really? Wow. So how does it have that much impact?
Well, think about it in a professional setting. If you can clearly express your ideas, persuade colleagues and clients, build rapport with others,
Right.
it's a huge advantage. It can be the deciding factor in getting hired or promoted.
Or even just having your ideas heard and valued.
Absolutely. The material even says that strong communication skills can give you an unfair advantage over someone who might have better technical skills but can't communicate them effectively.
It's like you could be the most brilliant person in the room, but if you can't convey your brilliance, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And on the flip side, the material talks about how poor communication can really hold you back.
Oh, for sure.
It can lead to self-doubt, frustration in relationships, and this feeling of being stuck like you're on a hamster wheel.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're working so hard but not getting anywhere.
Right. And that's often because you're not communicating effectively.
So how do we get better at this? How do we actually improve our communication skills?
Well, one key strategy is to simplify. Simplify your message. Get to the core of what you're trying to say and express it concisely.
So it's not about using a bunch of fancy words or talking for a long time?
Not at all. Clarity and brevity are key.
Got it. What else?
Another important point the material makes is about what happens after a disagreement.
Oh, yeah. The aftermath.
Exactly. That next conversation is crucial. It's your chance to repair any damage and build a deeper understanding.
It's not just about putting out the fire. It's about rebuilding.
Right. And speaking of navigating those tense moments, there's this technique called the conversational breath.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's so simple but powerful. Before you respond to something, especially in a heated situation, just take a deep, controlled breath.
Like a mindful breath.
Exactly. The material even gives a specific exercise. Inhale slowly for a count of 2. Pause briefly at the top. Then exhale slowly and completely.
It sounds so calming.
It is. It really helps to ground, interrupt that fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And allow your rational thinking to take over.
So it's all about moving from reacting to responding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that intentionality should also extend to how we listen and interpret what others are saying, especially when they're asking us questions.
Okay. Because
So-
sometimes a question isn't just a question, right?
Right. The material points out that people often have underlying intentions or hidden agendas behind their questions.
Oh, for sure. Like sometimes they're testing you.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the suggestion is to pause before you answer and consider the possible intent behind the question.
So we need to look beyond the surface level of what's being said.
Right. A classic example is, how was your day?
Yeah, we all get that one.
And while a simple fine might be okay in some cases,
Well-
taking a moment to consider what the person is really asking can lead to a much more meaningful response.
Are they genuinely interested?
Yeah.
Are they looking for an opportunity to share about their own day?
Exactly. It's about being present and perceptive in the interaction.
And the material even connects this to leadership.
It does. Leaders who remain calm and take that pause before responding in tough situations.
Yeah.
They can control the energy in the room, provide reassurance.
It's like they're modeling that behavior for everyone else.
Right. And that pause can also build trust and encourage deeper conversation.
So it seems like maintaining control in our communication is really a recurring theme here.
It definitely is. It's about controlling your words and your emotional reactions, especially when you're feeling challenged.
Yeah, that can be tough.
It is. The material even highlights the impact of slowing down your speech to project more assertiveness.
Interesting. So like if you say, I already told you I'm not going to do that, but you say it really slowly and deliberately.
Exactly. It has a total different impact than if you say it quickly and in a frustrated tone.
Right, because the tone completely changes the message.
It does. And the material also talks about why some people struggle with maintaining this control.
Like what are some of the underlying reasons?
It can be emotional reactivity, low self-esteem, insecurities.
Yeah, those can definitely show up in our communication.
They do, and it often manifests as using filler words like well, or maybe, or I think.
Right.
And the advice is to try to start your sentences with clear and direct language. Avoid those hesitant qualifiers.
So it's about being more intentional with our language.
Exactly. And speaking of intentionality, what about confidence in our communication?
Yeah, because it seems like that's something a lot of people struggle with.
It is. But the interesting thing is that you don't have to have confidence to start with.
Well, that's good to know.
Right. It
Except,
can actually develop as you become more assertive in your communication.
so it's like a byproduct of taking action.
Exactly. When you clearly and directly state your needs and thoughts, it naturally builds confidence over time.
It's a positive feedback loop.
It is. And just to be clear, assertiveness is not the same as being aggressive.
Right, that's a really important distinction.
It is. Assertiveness is about expressing yourself clearly and directly while still being respectful of others.
It's about finding that balance between honoring your own needs and respecting the needs of others.
Exactly.
The material also talks about how our word choices can have a big impact, even seemingly small, insignificant words.
Oh, yeah. Little words can make a big difference.
So what's an example of that?
The word just.
Mm,
It's so common, but it can actually undermine your confidence.
really?
How so?
Think about how often we say things like, I just wanted to check in, or I just have a quick question.
Yeah, all the time.
By using just, you're kind of minimizing yourself and your request.
It's like you're subconsciously apologizing for taking up space.
Right. And the material suggests removing just altogether.
So instead of saying, I just wanted to check in, you would say,
I wanted to check in.
it's so simple, but it does sound more confident.
It does. And the material also emphasizes the power of conciseness. Shorter, more direct messages often carry more weight and authority.
It's like that saying, less is more.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it also points out that people who communicate with confidence often speak less overall. Interesting. So it's not about talking a lot. It's about choosing your words carefully.
Precisely.
Okay. So we've talked about words, but what about emotions? Because let's be real, emotions can really hijack our communication sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And the material gets into that. It talks about emotional intelligence
Yeah.
and the importance of not letting others control your emotional state.
Right. Because if you let someone push your buttons, they've basically won.
Exactly. It's about maintaining your composure even when you're feeling provoked.
Easier said than done.
It can be, but it's a skill worth developing. The material also talks about people-pleasing.
Yeah. And how that can make it really hard to say no and set boundaries.
It can. It's like you're constantly putting other people's needs ahead of your own.
And it often comes from a place of wanting to be liked or accepted.
Exactly. And the material actually shares a personal anecdote about overcoming feelings of inadequacy and finding a more assertive voice.
That's inspiring because it shows that it's possible to change.
It is. And it also talks about over-apologizing.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of us are guilty of that.
It's a common habit,
Hmm.
but it can undermine your self-worth.
Right, because you're constantly putting yourself down.
Exactly. And the suggestion is to replace those unnecessary apologies with expressions of gratitude.
So instead of saying, sorry, I'm late, you would say,
Thank you for waiting.
I like that. It's a subtle shift,
Mm.
but it makes a big difference.
It does, and the material even points out that the ability to be assertive without resorting to people-pleasing is a common trait among successful leaders.
It's about knowing your worth and advocating for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about difficult conversations because, those are inevitable in life.
Oh, for sure. We can't avoid them.
And the material emphasizes that the goal in these situations shouldn't be to win the argument.
Right. It's not about proving who's right or wrong.
It's about connection and understanding.
Exactly. And to facilitate that, it introduces the concept of establishing a conversational frame.
Okay, what does that mean?
Before you dive into the tough stuff, you proactively outline the topic you want to discuss. your desired outcome for the conversation, and you try to get on the same page about how you'll approach it.
So it's like setting ground rules and expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It helps to create a more collaborative tone from the start.
I like that
Mhm.
because it's less likely to turn into a, screaming match.
Right. And even with a clear frame, you need to be flexible and prepared for things to go off track.
Because you can't always predict how a conversation is going to unfold.
Exactly. But you can gently guide it back to the main point.
Hmm.
And again, the focus should be on unraveling the issue together, not on being right.
Right. It's about understanding, not about winning.
Exactly. And the material uses this great metaphor to illustrate this. It's the full cup metaphor.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So imagine your mind as a cup that's already full of your existing beliefs and experiences.
Okay.
Now, if someone tries to pour more information into your already full cup without acknowledging what's already there, it's just going to overflow.
Or be rejected.
Right. So to create space for new perspectives, you need to first create some emptiness.
By listening.
Exactly. By being curious about the other person's viewpoint.
So asking questions like,
Yeah, how did you come to believe that? Or what experiences have shaped your view on this?
it's about emptying the cup a little bit before trying to fill it up again.
Exactly.
That's a really helpful analogy. And it highlights how important it is to understand the other person's perspective.
It is. Everyone brings their own baggage to the table, so to speak.
Right. And empathy is crucial in navigating those difficult conversations.
Absolutely. And the material reminds us that changing someone's mind is often a gradual process.
Yeah. It's not like you can just have one conversation and boom, their beliefs are totally transformed.
Right. It takes time and patience. And speaking of strong emotions, the text also talks about the red mist phenomenon.
Okay. What is that?
It refers to those intense emotional reactions that seem totally out of proportion to the situation.
We've all seen that happen.
We have. And the material explains that these reactions are often triggered by past pain or unresolved issues.
So it's not really about what's happening in the present moment.
Not entirely. It's like something from the past is being activated.
Hmm. And so how do you deal with someone who's in the red mist?
The advice is to give them space. Let their emotions settle before you try to engage logically.
Because when someone's flooded with emotion, they're not going to be receptive to reason.
Exactly. So sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen and validate their feelings.
And then once things have calmed down a little bit, you can have a more productive conversation.
Exactly.
So we've talked about logic and emotion, but what about authenticity in our communication?
That's crucial. The material really emphasizes the importance of being genuine, especially when you're trying to persuade or influence others.
Because people can sense when you're not being real.
They can. It's like jurors in a courtroom. They can sniff out insincerity a mile away.
And it talks about how timing and nonverbal cues can also play a big role in communication.
They do. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
Right. Your body language, your tone of voice, it all sends a message.
Exactly. And it highlights the power of vulnerability in building trust.
So like admitting when you're wrong or sharing your own imperfections,
Yeah, it can be disarming and it creates a sense of connection.
because it shows that you're human.
Exactly. And the material stresses that honesty is the foundation of any strong relationship.
Whether it's personal or professional.
Right. And it even suggests strategically leading with points of agreement in difficult situations.
Interesting. So instead of immediately jumping into the areas where you disagree,
You start by highlighting the things you do agree on.
it's like finding common ground before you tackle the tougher stuff.
Exactly. And throughout all of this, the material emphasizes the importance of self-reflection.
So like paying attention to your own communication patterns and seeing where you can improve.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
Now let's touch on small talk, because I think a lot of people find that awkward or challenging.
Small talk can be tough, but it's a necessary part of life.
It is. So what are some tips for making small talk less painful?
One is to ask open-ended questions.
Instead of just asking yes or no questions.
Right. Like instead of, did you have a good weekend? You could ask, what did you get up to this weekend?
Right. Because that invites them to share more.
Exactly. And it's helpful to approach conversations with a general goal in mind.
So like, what are you hoping to get out of this interaction?
Right. Are you trying to get to know someone better? Or just keep things light and positive?
It gives you a direction.
It does. And the material also suggests asking about people's personal journeys. Like, how did you get to where you are today?
That's a great question. Because everyone has a story.
They do. And you can also shift the focus to the future. Like, what are you looking forward to?
I like that. It's more optimistic.
It is, and it can lead to more engaging conversations.
So it's not just about talking about the weather or current events.
Not at all. It's about finding those little sparks of connection.
And the material even references Abraham Lincoln in this context.
It does. It talks about his ability to connect with people and build alliances.
Yeah, he was known for his honesty and empathy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all learn from.
And ultimately, all of this comes back to integrity.
It does. Acting with integrity in all your interactions builds trust and respect.
And that's essential for success in any area of life.
It is.
So it seems like the path to becoming a masterful communicator is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight.
Definitely. It's about making small, consistent adjustments to your habits over time.
And focusing on one thing at a time.
Exactly. Like maybe you start by working on eliminating filler words or reducing your tendency to over-apologize.
Right. It's about those little incremental improvements.
It is. And the material emphasizes that mastery is an ongoing process.
Because there will be ups and downs.
There will.
Yep.
But the long-term rewards are worth it. Stronger relationships, greater inner peace, increased influence.
It's about becoming the best communicator you can be.
Exactly.
And finally, let's circle back to setting boundaries and saying no effectively.
Such an important skill.
It is. And the material reiterates how crucial it is for our well-being to have healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. And it gives practical tips for how to decline requests directly and politely without making excuses.
Because sometimes a simple no is all you need.
It is. And the material talks about the mental clutter and stress that come from being indecisive.
Oh yeah, all that maybe energy.
Exactly. It drains you. So when you need to say no, be honest, be gentle, and include a positive closing.
Like, I can't make it this time, but thanks for the invitation.
Perfect. And it also talks about navigating no in professional settings.
Because that can be tricky.
It can. You want to be helpful, but you also need to protect your time and energy.
Right. And it suggests avoiding the word but when you're declining a request.
Yeah, because it can negate the no.
So instead of saying, I'd love to help, but I'm really busy, they can say,
I'm really busy right now, but thanks for thinking of me.
or even better, just, I'm really busy right now, but thanks for thinking of me.
Exactly. Just be upfront and honest. And the material connects setting boundaries with achieving balance in your life.
It's about prioritizing what matters most.
Right. And it talks about the freedom and confidence that come from mastering the art of no.
It's about taking control of your life.
Exactly.
And a big part of setting those boundaries is embracing radical honesty.
And ditching the over-explaining.
Yeah. Because sometimes we feel like we need to give a million reasons for saying no.
Right. But often a simple no is enough.
And the material actually shares a personal story about the positive impact of being more radically candid.
It's about being upfront and direct without being rude.
So like if someone asks you to do something you don't want to do,
You just say no thanks.
and you don't need to launch into a whole explanation.
Exactly. Just be honest and straightforward.
I like that. It's very freeing.
It is. And the material reminds us that when we're genuinely busy or unavailable, we don't need to make excuses.
Just state your boundaries clearly and move on.
Exactly. And it talks about how flimsy excuses can actually make people feel like you're not being sincere.
Right. It's better to just be upfront.
It is.
Yeah.
And finally, the material revisits the negative impact of using filler words.
Those ums and ahs.
Exactly. They can make you sound less confident.
So it's about being clear, concise, and intentional with your language.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up here, it seems like the overarching message is that mastering communication is a journey.
It is a continuous process of learning and growing.
And it's about making small, intentional shifts in how we interact with the world.
Right. And those small shifts can lead to big changes in your life.
Stronger relationships, greater peace of mind, more influence.
It's all within your reach.
So to the listener out there, I want you to think about a conversation you have coming up,
Maybe it's a tough conversation you've been dreading.
or just an everyday interaction.
And ask yourself how you could apply just one of these insights we've talked about today.
Could you take that 5-second pause?
Ask, what am I missing?
Practice a direct no.
Experiment with these techniques and see what happens.
Pay attention to the responses you get. Observe the impact of your words.
You might be surprised at the positive ripple effects that unfold.
Because when you improve your communication, you improve your life.
And that's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely.
It is.